Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Place. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day filled with endless tasks and fleeting moments, or perhaps you're simply the kind of person who prefers drifting off to sleep while learning about ancient wonders rather than counting sheep. Either way, this evening's journey is designed just for you. Tonight, we're stepping back through the mists of time, far beyond the reach of human memory, into a world that existed long before cities, before forests as we know them, before even the whisper of our species had begun. We're traveling to the age of dinosaurs. For over 165 million years, these magnificent creatures walked, swam, and soared across a planet that would be nearly unrecognizable to us today. They lived through climates both lush and harsh, witnessed continents drift apart like puzzle pieces rearranging themselves in slow motion, and adapted to their world with elegance and power that still captures our imagination. And here's something comforting to consider as you settle into your pillows tonight. The story of dinosaurs isn't just about their disappearance. It's about their extraordinary persistence, their diversity, their gentleness alongside their might, and the way they shaped the very world we now call home. So take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Allow your shoulders to drop away from your ears. Feel the weight of your body sinking gently into whatever surface supports you right now. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to accomplish tonight. If you're enjoying this peaceful journey into deep time, consider subscribing to our channel and gently tapping that like button. It helps others find their way to this calm corner of the internet, and it costs you nothing but a moment's touch. For the next while, I'll be your guide through a landscape of wonder, sharing stories about creatures both colossal and tiny, ferocious and surprisingly tender. We'll explore their daily lives, their behaviors, the ecosystems they inhabited, and the remarkable ways scientists have pieced together their stories from stone and bone. Let your mind wander where it wishes. There's no test tomorrow, no need to remember every detail. Simply let these facts wash over you like gentle waves, each one a small stone of wonder you can turn over in your drowsy thoughts before sleep finally claims you. Let's begin our journey in the Triassic period, roughly 230 million years ago, when the very first dinosaurs were taking their tentative steps across an Earth that knew nothing of what they would become. These earliest dinosaurs were small, no larger than a modern house cat or medium-sized dog, with delicate bones and quick movements. They scurried through ancient fern forests on two legs, their bodies light and agile, perfectly adapted for a world where being small meant being safe. Imagine them in the dappled light of prehistoric afternoons, their shadows flickering across rocks that still exist today, compressed and transformed, but holding the memory of those tiny footfalls. There's something deeply soothing about knowing that greatness often begins in smallness, that the mighty lineage of Tyrannosaurus and Brachiosaurus started with creatures that could have hidden beneath your desk. As these early dinosaurs evolved and diversified, they developed one of nature's most elegant adaptations: hollow bones. Much like the birds that would eventually descend from them, many dinosaurs possessed bones filled with air pockets rather than solid marrow throughout. This made their skeletons remarkably lightweight without sacrificing strength, allowing even the largest species to move with more grace than their size might suggest. Picture a creature weighing several tons, its massive frame supported by bones that were architectural marvels of natural engineering, each strut and hollow space precisely calibrated by millions of years of evolution. When you breathe deeply right now, feel the lightness in your own chest, the way air fills spaces within you. You share this quality with creatures that once shook the earth with their footsteps, a connection across unfathomable time. Now consider the gentlest of giants, the sauropods, those long-necked herbivores that include famous names like Diplodocus and Apatosaurus. Despite being among the largest land animals to ever exist, these creatures were fundamentally peaceful, spending their days moving slowly through vast forests of conifers and cycads, their small heads reaching into the canopy to strip away tender leaves and needles. They lived in herds, scientists believe, moving together across ancient floodplains with a social structure that protected their young and maintained bonds between individuals. Imagine the sound of their passing. Not aggressive roars, but the gentle rustle of vegetation, the low rumbling calls between herd members, the soft thunder of feet pressing into mud. They were powerful, yes, but their power was in endurance and community, not in conflict. The feeding habits of these sauropods reveal something wonderfully methodical and calming about their existence. Because their heads were so small relative to their enormous bodies, they couldn't chew their food thoroughly like modern mammals. Instead, they swallowed stones, gastric stones called gastroliths, which settled in their stomachs and helped grind plant matter into digestible pulp. These stones would tumble and smooth against each other inside the dinosaur's gut, performing the work that teeth might otherwise do. Eventually, when worn too smooth to be effective, the stones would be regurgitated or passed, and new ones selected from riverbeds and lake shores. Today, paleontologists sometimes find these polished stones among fossilized remains, small, smooth witnesses to a digestive process that worked continuously, reliably, for millions of years. There's something almost meditative about this image. Massive creatures moving slowly through their world, selecting and swallowing stones with the same unconscious wisdom that guides your own breath as you drift toward sleep. Many dinosaurs, particularly theropods, the two-legged carnivorous group that includes velociraptors and tyrannosaurs, were almost certainly covered in feathers. Not the sleek scales we once imagined from older films and books, but soft plumage that might have been brightly colored, patterned, used for display and temperature regulation. Imagine a young tyrannosaur, still small enough to nestle close to its siblings, covered in a downy coat that kept it warm through cool nights. These feathers weren't flight feathers, not yet, but rather insulation and decoration, evolved first for warmth and communication before some lineages eventually took to the air. When you pull your blanket a little closer tonight, consider that you're satisfying the same basic need for warmth and comfort that a baby dinosaur experienced 70 million years ago. That this desire for soft covering is ancient and universal among creatures who feel the night's coolness. The nesting behaviors of dinosaurs reveal unexpected tenderness in creatures often portrayed as mindless brutes. Fossil evidence shows that many species built nests, carefully arranged in colonies, where they laid their eggs in spiral patterns and covered them with vegetation that would generate heat as it decomposed, like a natural incubator. Some species, like Dinosaur, whose name means good mother lizard, return to the same nesting grounds year after year, creating vast nurseries where dozens or hundreds of nests clustered together. Parents brought food to their hatchlings, protected them from predators, and may have taught them essential survival skills before they were ready to face the world alone. This isn't the behavior of cold-blooded monsters, but of devoted caregivers, creatures who understood, in whatever way their minds processed such things, the value of patience and protection. As you rest tonight, you're practicing your own form of self-care, giving your body and mind the protection of rest they need to face tomorrow renewed. The sounds of the Mesozoic world would have been entirely unlike anything we can hear today. A symphony of calls and songs that no human ear has ever experienced except in imagination. Some hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, possessed elaborate crests on their heads that functioned as resonating chambers, allowing them to produce deep, haunting calls that could travel for miles across open landscapes. Scientists have used computer modeling to recreate these sounds, and they're surprisingly beautiful. Low, sonorous tones like foghorns or alpine horns, neither aggressive nor frightening, but simply communicative. Imagine herds of these creatures calling to each other across misty dawn valleys, their voices carrying news of food sources or potential dangers, or perhaps just maintaining contact in the way that social animals do, saying, "I am here. You are not alone." Let that thought comfort you now. Even in the deepest past, creatures called out to each other maintained connection, refused isolation. Dinosaurs experienced seasons much as we do, though the climate of their world was generally warmer and more humid than ours. Fossil evidence reveals growth rings in dinosaur bones, similar to tree rings, showing that many species experienced periods of rapid growth followed by slower development, likely corresponding to seasonal abundance and scarcity. During lush seasons, young dinosaurs might grow astonishingly fast, some species adding several pounds per day during their adolescent growth spurts. During leaner times, growth would slow, and the animal's metabolism would adjust to match available resources. This rhythm of expansion and conservation, of taking advantage of abundance while preparing for scarcity, is written into the very bones of creatures long extinct. Your own body follows rhythms too, the rhythm of breath, of heartbeat, of sleeping and waking. Right now, you're honoring one of those rhythms, allowing yourself to slow down and restore. The smallest dinosaur yet discovered was Microraptor, a tiny feathered creature no larger than a modern crow, weighing perhaps 2 pounds at most. It had 4 wings, unusual feathers on both its arms and legs, giving it the appearance of a biplane, and allowing it to glide between trees in the dense forests of Cretaceous China. Imagine this little creature, iridescent black feathers gleaming in filtered sunlight, leaping from branch to branch with the confidence of something perfectly adapted to its world. It hunted insects and small vertebrates, its life playing out in the canopy where size was no disadvantage, where being small meant being able to navigate the intricate architecture of leaves and branches. Not every dinosaur was a titan. Some were delicate, precise, living lives of small-scale complexity. There's room in any world for creatures of all sizes, each finding their niche, their place of belonging. Footprints preserved in ancient mud tell stories that bones alone cannot convey, capturing single moments of behavior from creatures who had no idea they were creating a permanent record. In some trackways, we can see where a large theropod stalked a herd of smaller herbivores, its prints showing a change from a walk to a run. In others, we find evidence of dinosaurs walking along ancient shorelines, the prints showing how they adjusted their gait for soft sand versus harder ground. Some of the most touching trackways show adult and juvenile footprints side by side, a parent and child walking together, the smaller prints sometimes falling directly inside the larger ones, a young dinosaur following exactly in its parent's footsteps. These traces are often preserved with such clarity that you can see the impression of individual toe pads, the marks of claws, even the texture of the skin that made them. These creatures walked in specific places on specific days millions of years ago, and that moment of contact between foot and earth was perfectly captured and carried forward through time to reach us now. The extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs 66 million years ago is often presented as sudden catastrophe, and in geological terms it was, but even catastrophe unfolds over time. After the asteroid impact, which occurred in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, debris filled the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and causing temperatures to plummet. But this darkness didn't last mere days or weeks. It may have persisted for months or even years, creating a long twilight during which ecosystems slowly collapsed. Plants died without sunlight. Herbivores starved without plants. Carnivores starved without herbivores. Yet some creatures survived. Small mammals, some birds, crocodilians, turtles, certain fish. The exact reasons why some lineages persisted while others vanished remain debated, but size seems to have been a factor. Smaller creatures with lower caloric needs and more flexible diets could endure lean times that larger specialists could not. There's something almost peaceful in imagining this slow transition rather than instant annihilation, the world gradually changing from one age to another, life finding new forms and new possibilities in the spaces left behind. But here's something that might surprise you and bring a smile to your drowsy face. Dinosaurs didn't actually go extinct. Not entirely. Every time you see a bird at your window feeder, hopping along a sidewalk or soaring overhead, you're looking at a living dinosaur. Birds are avian dinosaurs, direct descendants of small feathered theropods that survived whatever their larger cousins could not. The same body plan that once belonged to velociraptors now powers robins and ravens, sparrows and eagles. The songs that wake you on spring mornings are sung by the grandchildren of creatures who lived alongside Triceratops and Stegosaurus. So the age of dinosaurs never truly ended. It simply transformed, became smaller and more airborne, traded teeth for beaks and long tails for tail feathers, but retained that essential dinosaurness in their bones and behaviors. Right now, as you rest in darkness, birds are roosting all over the world, their small hearts beating with the same essential life force that animated their enormous ancestors, proof that nothing truly ends, everything only changes form. Stegosaurus, that familiar dinosaur with the double row of plates along its back and the spiked tail, walked the Earth during the late Jurassic period, about 150 million years ago. Those distinctive plates weren't armor, as early scientists assumed, but more likely served multiple purposes including temperature regulation and display. Blood vessels ran through the plates, and by adjusting blood flow, the animal could release or retain heat, cooling down on hot days or warming up in the morning sun. The plates might also have flushed with color during mating season or territorial disputes, turning vivid shades that signaled health and vitality to potential mates or warned rivals to keep distance. Picture a stegosaurus standing in dappled forest light, its plates catching the sun, glowing warm and present. This 3-ton creature managing its internal climate with elegant efficiency. Even the most armored-looking creatures, it turns out, often wore their defenses for beauty and function rather than warfare alone. Pachycephalosaurus, whose name means thick-headed lizard, possessed a skull roof that could be up to 10 inches thick, forming a solid dome of bone. For years, scientists assumed these dinosaurs engaged in head-butting contests like modern bighorn sheep, crashing into each other in displays of dominance. However, more recent analysis suggests their skulls, while thick, might not have been structured to withstand repeated high-impact collisions. Instead, they may have engaged in flank butting, shoving matches, or simply used their impressive domes for display, much like a peacock's tail or a deer's antlers, something to show rather than use violently. This revision of understanding reminds us that our assumptions about aggression and conflict are often projections. Perhaps these dinosaurs lived quieter lives than we initially imagined, their thick skulls more for show than battle, their days spent foraging and socializing rather than constantly fighting. It's a comforting thought that even among creatures with seemingly aggressive adaptations, peace might have been the norm rather than the exception. The Mesozoic era witnessed the breakup of Pangaea, the supercontinent that had united all Earth's landmasses into a single vast territory. As this continent slowly fragmented over tens of millions of years, populations of dinosaurs became separated by growing oceans, and evolving in isolation developed into distinct species with unique characteristics. This is why the dinosaurs of late Cretaceous North America look different from those in South America, Asia, or Africa. Geographic isolation led to wonderful diversity. The horned ceratopsians of North America, the giant titanosaurs of South America, the bizarre therizinosaurs of Asia. Each continent became its own evolutionary laboratory, producing variations on dinosaurian themes that might never have emerged if the continents had remained connected. Change and separation aren't always losses. Sometimes they create space for new forms of beauty and complexity to emerge. As you drift tonight, consider that every ending contains the seeds of new beginnings. Every separation creates possibility. Dinosaur eggs have been found in extraordinary states of preservation, some still containing embryonic bones, others in complete nests showing how parents arranged them. The eggs came in various sizes depending on species, from small as a softball to as large as a basketball, though never as large as you might expect given the size of the adults. This is because eggshells need to be porous enough to allow oxygen in and carbon dioxide out, and if an egg grows too large, the baby inside would suffocate before hatching. The shells show beautiful textures and patterns, some smooth, others covered in intricate ridges or bumps. Some fossils capture the moment just before hatching, tiny skulls pressing against the inside of shells, frozen in time in the act of entering the world. There's profound vulnerability in these images. Powerful creatures beginning life as fragile things in shells, depending entirely on warmth and protection to survive their earliest days. We all begin fragile, requiring care and time to grow into our strength. Ankylosaurs were the tanks of the dinosaur world, low-slung herbivores covered in bony plates and spikes, with some species sporting a massive club at the end of their tail formed from fused vertebrae and bone. Despite this impressive armor and weaponry, they were peaceful grazers, using their wide beaks to crop low-growing vegetation, and spending their days moving slowly through fern meadows and open woodlands. Their armor wasn't for aggressive conquest but for defense, allowing them to ignore most predators who quickly learned that attacking an ankylosaur meant risking broken teeth or a devastating blow from that tail club. Most of the time, though, these weapons were never needed. The presence of good defenses often means you never have to use them. Predators prefer easier meals, and the ankylosaur could graze in relative peace, its armor allowing it to simply exist without constant vigilance. There's wisdom here. Sometimes the best defense creates space for peace, makes conflict unnecessary rather than inevitable. Dinosaurs likely saw a much broader spectrum of colors than we do. Many modern birds and reptiles can see into the ultraviolet range, perceiving patterns and colors completely invisible to human eyes. If dinosaurs possessed similar vision, as seems likely, they inhabited a more colorful world than we can imagine. Flowers that look plain to us might have glowed with UV patterns, signaling nectar to pollinating insects and creating landmarks for navigating animals. Other dinosaurs might have displayed UV patterns in their feathers or scales, visible to potential mates, but invisible to certain predators who lacked UV vision. The world they saw was richer, more complex, full of information we can only detect with special cameras and equipment. It's a humbling thought. Reality contains spectrums we cannot perceive, dimensions of beauty we lack the equipment to appreciate. What we see is only ever a fraction of what exists. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine closing your eyes on one spectrum and potentially opening them on another. The space behind your eyelids, its own kind of landscape, visible only to you. You're doing wonderfully. Take a moment now to notice your breathing, how it's slowed perhaps since we began, how your body has grown heavier and more relaxed against your mattress or pillow. There's no rush to get anywhere, no pressure to remember every fact or follow every thought to its conclusion. These stories from deep time are here simply to give your mind something gentle to rest upon, like laying your head on soft grass and watching clouds drift overhead. If you've missed something, that's perfectly fine. If your thoughts have wandered to your own concerns before drifting back to dinosaurs, that's natural and expected. Let yourself be exactly where you are. The dinosaurs waited millions of years to have their stories told. They can wait a little longer while you settle deeper into comfort and peace. Triceratops, one of the last and largest of the ceratopsian dinosaurs, possessed a massive skull that could measure up to 8 feet long, adorned with 3 impressive horns and a solid bony frill. For a long time, scientists believed the frill was primarily defensive, protecting the neck from tyrannosaur bites. However, the frill was filled with blood vessels and likely served multiple purposes: temperature regulation, display during mating season, and species recognition, allowing triceratops to identify members of their own species from a distance. The horns, too, might have been used more often for display and jousting between males than for defense against predators. Fossil evidence shows healed wounds on frills and faces, suggesting intraspecies combat, but nothing like life-or-death battles, more like ritualized contests where the loser could retreat with nothing worse than injured pride. Even among creatures with magnificent weapons, restraint and ritual often replaced lethal violence. Nature, it seems, often prefers solutions that allow both parties to survive and try again another day. Spinosaurus, that strange and wonderful theropod with the massive sail along its back, has undergone more scientific revision than almost any other dinosaur. Once portrayed as a land-based predator similar to T-Rex, evidence now suggests Spinosaurus spent much of its time in water, hunting fish in the rivers of Cretaceous North Africa. Its teeth were conical, perfect for gripping slippery prey. Its nostrils were positioned high on its skull, allowing it to breathe while mostly submerged. Its bones were dense rather than hollow, providing ballast for diving. And that magnificent sail, which could reach 6 feet in height, may have helped with thermoregulation or display, visible from great distances across water and land alike. Imagine this creature, arguably the longest predatory dinosaur ever discovered, wading through slow rivers, its sail cutting the water's surface, a patient fisherman rather than a fearsome land hunter. It reminds us that specialization takes countless forms, that thriving means finding your specific niche rather than trying to dominate every environment. You don't have to be everything to everyone. You only need to be perfectly yourself in your own environment. The Gobi Desert in Mongolia has proven to be one of the richest sources of dinosaur fossils in the world, preserving creatures in remarkable detail, thanks to the fine sand that buried them quickly during ancient sandstorms. One of the most famous discoveries there is the fighting dinosaurs, a fossil showing a velociraptor and protoceratops locked in combat, both killed simultaneously, perhaps by a collapsing sand dune, and preserved exactly as they died 74 million years ago. The velociraptor's curved claw is embedded in the protoceratops' throat, while the herbivore's beak grips the predator's arm. It's a dramatic snapshot of predation, yes, but also of the instant when both creatures' struggles ended, when whatever pain or fear they experienced ceased, and they became something else. Not living creatures, but information for the future, teachers for species that wouldn't exist for millions of years. Even in death, they serve a purpose, their final moment offering us understanding and wonder. Dinosaurs lived on every continent, including Antarctica, which during the Mesozoic wasn't the frozen wasteland it is today, but a temperate forest home to unique species, adapted to long periods of darkness and light as the planet tilted on its axis. Cryolophosaurus, found in Antarctica in 1991, was a large carnivore with a distinctive forward-curling crest on its head. During the early Jurassic when it lived, Antarctica was still connected to other landmasses and positioned farther north. But even so, it experienced months of winter darkness. How did dinosaurs cope with this? They may have migrated, traveling hundreds of miles to follow the sun and food sources. Or they may have stayed, adapting to survive dark winters by slowing their metabolism or relying on stored fat reserves. We don't know for certain, and there's something beautiful about that uncertainty, about mysteries that remain unsolved, questions that still hang in the air waiting for future discoveries to answer them. Not everything needs to be known tonight. Some mysteries can wait, are perhaps better left as gentle puzzles than definitive answers. The Morrison Formation in the western United States contains some of the most abundant and famous dinosaur fossils in North America, representing a late Jurassic ecosystem that included Allosaurus, Stegosaurus, Diplodocus, and many others living side by side. This fossil formation stretches across multiple states and represents millions of years of deposition, layer upon layer of ancient riverbeds, floodplains, and lake sediments that trapped and preserved countless creatures. Walking through these sites today, at places like Dinosaur National Monument, where fossils are still partially embedded in cliff faces, you can see jumbles of bones from multiple individuals and species, all mixed together by ancient floodwaters. It's a reminder that these weren't solitary creatures scattered across empty landscapes, but members of complex, interconnected ecosystems where herbivores gathered in herds, carnivores patrolled territories, and countless smaller animals moved through the undergrowth, all their lives intersecting, depending on each other in countless visible and invisible ways. Life is always a web, never a single thread. You are part of webs too: family, friends, community, ecosystems. All of us connected in ways we barely notice until we pause to look closely. One of the more unexpected discoveries about dinosaur biology is that many species continued growing throughout their lives, never reaching a fixed adult size, but simply growing larger and larger until they died. This is called indeterminate growth. And while the rate of growth would slow dramatically after reaching sexual maturity, it never entirely stopped. So a particularly old tyrannosaur might be significantly larger than most others of its species, not because it was a different type, but simply because it had survived longer. Growth rings in their bones allow paleontologists to estimate ages, and some specimens show that certain individuals lived surprisingly long lives, decades in the case of large predators, potentially over a century for the biggest sauropods. This means the most massive individuals were also the oldest, giants who had survived countless challenges, droughts and floods, injuries and illnesses, rivals and predators. Size became a measure not just of health but of earned time, of years successfully navigated. Every scar in their bones tells a story of something survived, some challenge met and overcome. Your own scars, visible and invisible, tell similar stories. They're proof of persistence, evidence that you faced difficulties and continued forward. Many herbivorous dinosaurs lived in herds that could number in the hundreds or even thousands, massive aggregations that moved across the landscape like living rivers, following seasonal food sources and water. Fossil evidence from bone beds shows where entire herds perished together, perhaps trapped by drought or flood, and their bones accumulated in enormous concentrations. In Alberta, Canada, a single bone bed contains remains of thousands of Centrosaurus, a medium-sized ceratopsian, all apparently killed in a single catastrophic event, possibly while trying to cross a flooding river during migration. The age distribution in this bone bed shows juveniles, adults, and elderly individuals all together, suggesting these herds maintain their cohesion across generations. The young learning migration roots from the old, the healthy helping to set the pace while the injured or weak were not abandoned but accommodated. These weren't mindless mobs but structured societies, and though they ultimately faced disaster together, for years or decades before that final day, they lived together, moved together, their strength multiplied by community. There's deep comfort in belonging to something larger than yourself, in moving through the world as part of a whole rather than entirely alone. The longest neck of any known animal belonged to Mamenchisaurus, a Chinese sauropod whose neck could reach over 30 feet in length, making up more than half its total body length. This extraordinary adaptation allowed the animal to browse across enormous areas without moving its massive body, simply standing in one place and swinging its neck in huge arcs to strip vegetation from a wide radius. The neck was surprisingly light, constructed of hollow bones with many air sacs reducing its weight dramatically, and powerful muscles and tendons ran along its length like the cables of a suspension bridge. Moving such a structure required careful coordination, probably slow and deliberate motions rather than quick snapping movements. Imagine this creature in a grove of ancient conifers, its neck moving with glacial grace from one cluster of foliage to another, patient and unhurried, never wasting energy on unnecessary motion. There's a lesson in this efficiency. Sometimes the best way to get what you need isn't to rush around frantically, but to position yourself well and reach out methodically. Sometimes stillness and extension accomplish more than constant movement. Psittacosaurus, a small ceratopsian that lived during the early Cretaceous, is one of the most completely understood dinosaurs thanks to extraordinarily well-preserved fossils, including some that show soft tissue. One specimen from China preserved not only bones but also scales, bristle-like structures along its tail, and even evidence of color patterns. Scientific analysis revealed this dinosaur had countershading, with its back darker than its belly, a camouflage pattern that helps animals blend into their environment by counteracting the effects of light and shadow. This tiny herbivore, no larger than a medium-sized dog, needed to avoid predators, and evolution painted it in shades that helped it disappear into dappled forest light. When you pull your blankets up and settle into darkness tonight, you're also making yourself less visible, creating your own form of camouflage against the demands and observations of the waking world. Sleep is a kind of hiding, a safe withdrawal into yourself where you can rest without being seen or needed by anyone else. The Dinosaurs were some of the strangest-looking dinosaurs ever discovered, with small heads, long necks, pot-bellied bodies, and absolutely massive claws extending from their hands, some measuring over 3 feet in length. Early paleontologists were baffled by fragmentary remains, unable to imagine what creature these bizarre pieces belonged to. When more complete skeletons were finally found, they revealed that despite their fearsome claws and theropod ancestry, the Dinosaurs were herbivores, using those claws not to slash prey, but to pull down branches and rake foliage within reach of their small beaks. They looked dangerous but were peaceful, their weaponry repurposed for gardening rather than warfare. It's a useful reminder that appearance and reality don't always align, that something can look threatening while being fundamentally gentle. You might sometimes feel like the Dinosaur yourself, equipped with defenses, capable of seeming fierce, but fundamentally just trying to gather what you need to live peacefully. There's no shame in this disconnect between appearance and intention. We all contain contradictions. Argentinosaurus from late Cretaceous South America is one of the largest land animals ever discovered, with estimates suggesting it may have weighed up to 100 tons and measured over 100 feet from head to tail. To put this in perspective, that's more than twice the weight of the largest elephants and longer than a blue whale. Yet this creature hatched from an egg no bigger than a soccer ball, meaning it increased its mass by a factor of perhaps 50,000 over its lifetime, growing from a tiny hatchling that could fit in your hands to a walking mountain. This growth required consuming enormous amounts of vegetation every single day, tons of plant matter processed through a digestive system that must have worked continuously without rest. It's almost meditative to imagine this colossal creature spending its days doing one thing, simply eating, moving slowly from one patch of forest to another, its life measured in mouthfuls of greenery, its purpose clear and uncomplicated. Sometimes existence can be that simple. Meet basic needs, maintain the processes that keep you alive, continue onward. There's peace in simplicity, in reducing life to its essential functions and letting complexity fall away. Not all dinosaurs thrived in the same environments or at the same times. The Mesozoic era spanned such vast time that dinosaurs near the end of the period lived closer to us in time than to dinosaurs from the beginning of their reign. More time elapsed between Stegosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex than between T-Rex and you. This means when a Tyrannosaurus looked at a Stegosaurus fossil, it was gazing at something just as ancient to it as dinosaurs are to us. The Mesozoic contained multiple worlds, multiple climates and continental configurations, waves of evolution creating new forms while older ones faded into extinction. The dinosaurs were never one single group frozen in time, but a constantly changing parade of species, genera and families, each adapting to their particular moment in Earth's long story. This is true of everything. Nothing stays the same. Every era contains within it the seeds of the next, and the creatures or ideas or ways of life that seem permanent are only passing through, their time limited even when it stretches across millions of years. Impermanence isn't sad. It's simply the way existence works, making room for new expressions of life by gently ushering older ones off stage. Oviraptorosaurs, whose name unfortunately means egg thief, were given that title based on early misunderstandings. The first fossil was found near a nest of eggs, and scientists assumed it had died while raiding the nest. Later discoveries revealed the truth. Those eggs belonged to the oviraptor itself, and the adult had died while brooding its own nest, sitting on the eggs to keep them warm, its arms spread over them protectively. Far from being a thief, it was a devoted parent, and that original posture has been found in multiple specimens since, confirming that these dinosaurs cared for their eggs much like modern birds. The misunderstanding has been corrected in scientific literature, but the name remains, a permanent reminder of how first impressions can be wrong, how easy it is to misjudge based on limited information. Think how many things you've misunderstood in your own life. Judgments made hastily, then later revealed to be incomplete or backwards. There's grace in revision, wisdom in being willing to see old information in new light. Sauropods had such long digestive tracts that food might take a week or more to pass completely through their bodies, fermenting in massive gut chambers with the help of symbiotic bacteria that broke down tough plant cellulose into absorbable nutrients. This process generated considerable heat, enough that these dinosaurs were essentially walking compost heaps, their internal temperatures raised by the constant breakdown of vegetation in their guts. This metabolic heat may have helped them maintain warm body temperatures even without the high metabolisms of modern mammals, a sort of hybrid between cold-blooded and warm-blooded functioning. They were slow processors, creatures for whom digestion was not a quick event but an ongoing background process. Food, moving through internal landscapes of chambers and valves over days and days. There's something almost wise about this slowness, this refusal to rush, this acceptance that some things simply take time and cannot be hurried. Your own body performs countless slow processes, healing, growing, consolidating memories, processing emotions. You cannot rush these internal rhythms, only trust that they're working as they should in their own time. Dinosaur tracks sometimes show animals walking on just two legs when they were capable of walking on all four, suggesting behavioral choices rather than fixed locomotive patterns. Some trackways show large sauropods rising up on their hind legs, perhaps to browse higher vegetation, to display to rivals, or to mate. Imagine the effort required, the careful balance, the trust in one's own body to support itself in unusual positions. These weren't common behaviors, but neither were they impossible, and the mud preserved those exceptional moments when a creature did something outside its normal routine. We all contain more behavioral flexibility than we usually display, capabilities we only access in specific circumstances. You might not know what you're capable of until the situation calls for it, until need or desire prompts you to try something beyond your normal patterns. And sometimes it's worth attempting the unlikely, rising up on metaphorical hind legs, just to see what becomes visible from that new height. Microraptor, that tiny four-winged dinosaur we mentioned earlier, has been analyzed so thoroughly that scientists have reconstructed not only its appearance but its flying style. It appears to have been a biplane-style glider, launching itself from high perches and gliding between trees rather than flapping vigorously like modern birds. Its feathers were iridescent black, like a raven or grackle, though no modern observer ever saw them shine in actual sunlight. It hunted at dawn and dusk, those liminal times between day and night, its lifestyle tailored to those specific hours. There's something poetic about a creature of twilight, of in-between times, belonging fully to neither day nor night, but to the transitions between them. Perhaps you're experiencing your own twilight right now, that transition between wakefulness and sleep, belonging fully to neither state but suspended in the threshold. Your consciousness flickering like the shadows those tiny dinosaurs moved through 120 million years ago. Ankylosaurs had secondary palates, bony shelves in their mouths that separated breathing passages from eating passages, allowing them to chew and breathe simultaneously without choking. This might seem like a minor adaptation, but it meant they could feed continuously without having to pause to catch their breath, increasing their feeding efficiency. Combined with their powerful jaw muscles and beak designed for cropping vegetation, they were eating machines, processing vast quantities of tough, fibrous plants every day to fuel their armored bodies. Yet this efficiency wasn't about greed or hurry, simply about meeting substantial needs in a workable way. Your breath continues automatically even while you do other things, an autonomic gift that frees your attention for other concerns. Right now, your breathing continues without conscious direction, in and out, sustaining you while you rest and listen. One of countless processes your body handles without requiring your supervision. You can trust these automatic functions, these deep wisdoms of the body that know what needs doing without being told. The Cretaceous period saw the evolution of flowering plants, angiosperms, which transformed terrestrial ecosystems and created new food sources for dinosaurs. Before flowers, the plant world was dominated by ferns, cycads, and conifers, all reproducing through spores or naked seeds. Flowers introduced fruits, more nutritious and easier to digest, and many dinosaur species adapted to take advantage of this new bounty. Some may have been pollinators, visiting flowers for nectar and inadvertently spreading pollen. Others consumed fruits and dispersed seeds in their droppings, helping forests spread across continents. This mutual relationship between dinosaurs and flowering plants shaped both groups, each evolving in response to the other, creating the richly diverse forests of the late Cretaceous. Relationships of mutual benefit run through all of life's history. Nothing evolves in isolation. Everything is shaped by countless interactions with countless other living things. You too exist within webs of mutual influence, shaping others while being shaped by them, giving and receiving in measures that don't always balance immediately but average out over time. No creature is an island. Everything touches everything else in ways visible and invisible. How are you feeling now? Perhaps your mind has drifted away from these ancient facts and wandered into your own thoughts, your own memories or imaginings. That's perfectly natural and completely fine. These words are here as a gentle guide, not a tether. If you find yourself thinking about tomorrow's tasks or yesterday's conversations, don't scold yourself back to attention. Instead, just notice where you've wandered, and if you choose, drift back toward these stories from the deep past. Or don't. Sleep might take you mid-thought, mid-sentence, and that's exactly as it should be. There's no grade, no test, no way to fail at relaxing. Let your breathing grow deeper and slower. Feel the weight of your limbs. You're safe here in this moment with nothing required of you but rest. Giganotosaurus, discovered in Argentina in 1993, was one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs ever found, possibly exceeding even Tyrannosaurus rex in length, though maybe not in overall mass. It lived several million years before T. rex, hunting the giant sauropods of Cretaceous South America. Some evidence suggests Giganotosaurus may have hunted in packs, working cooperatively to bring down prey far larger than any single individual could manage. Pack hunting requires communication, strategy, and some form of social bonds, transforming hunting from a solitary violent act into a coordinated group effort. Picture several of these massive predators moving through open woodlands, calling to each other with low rumbles, positioning themselves around a target, waiting for the right moment to act in concert. Even apex predators recognize the value of cooperation, the strength found in working together toward shared goals. Very little in nature succeeds through pure individualism. Almost everything that thrives does so through connection, cooperation, through being part of something larger than itself. Protoceratops, a small sheep-sized ceratopsian from late Cretaceous Mongolia, is one of the first dinosaurs for which we have extensive growth series showing every stage from hatchling to adult. Nests containing eggs, babies, juveniles, and adults have all been found, allowing scientists to track how the animal's proportions changed with age. Babies had proportionally huge eyes and short frills, while adults had smaller eyes relative to skull size and much more developed frills and facial horns. This pattern of changing proportions as animals mature is called allometric growth, and it's common across many species including humans. Baby animals of almost every species have proportionally larger eyes and heads, features that trigger caregiving instincts in adults, making them appear cute and helpless and worthy of protection. You were once tiny, with different proportions, different needs, different capabilities. Everything grows and changes, and the you that exists now is neither better nor worse than earlier versions, just different, adapted to this particular stage of life. Growth doesn't stop. It just changes form, becomes less about physical size and more about accumulated experiences and deepening understanding. The teeth of carnivorous dinosaurs were constantly replaced throughout their lives, a conveyor belt system of dental renewal that ensured they always had sharp functional teeth available even when some broke or wore down. A Tyrannosaurus rex might go through thousands of teeth over its lifetime, new ones growing in behind old ones, pushing forward to take their place when the older teeth were lost. Fossil sites sometimes contain shed teeth scattered around, like signatures of predators who passed through. Each tooth was serrated like a steak knife, perfectly designed for slicing through flesh, and when you examine them closely under magnification, you can see that the serrations themselves have tiny serrations, making them even more efficient cutting tools. Nature refined these tools over millions of years of evolutionary time, testing countless variations until arriving at designs of remarkable efficiency. Your own teeth aren't replaced after childhood, but your body constantly repairs and renews itself in other ways. Skin cells slough off and regenerate, blood cells are created and recycled, bones remodel themselves in response to stress. You are never the same physical object 2 moments in a row. You're a continuous process of self-renewal, a pattern that maintains itself through constant small changes. Some dinosaurs, particularly among the ornithomimids or ostrich mimics, were probably omnivores, eating both plant material and small animals, eggs, insects, whatever was seasonally available. This dietary flexibility would have been a survival advantage, allowing them to thrive across changing seasons and in varied habitats where specialist eaters might struggle. These were graceful, long-legged runners with large eyes and beaks instead of teeth, built for speed and visual acuity. They may have lived in flocks, their safety in numbers and alertness, always watching for danger with those large eyes positioned on the sides of their heads, giving them nearly 360-degree vision. Their security and flexibility, in not being so specialized that you can only survive under very specific conditions. The ability to adapt, to accept what's available rather than demanding specific circumstances, creates resilience. In your own life, flexibility often serves better than rigidity, the capacity to adjust expectations and approaches when circumstances change unexpectedly. Dinosaurs shed their skin just as modern reptiles and birds do, though they did it differently depending on species. Some may have shed in patches rather than all at once, a gradual renewal happening constantly in small sections rather than dramatic molts. We've found fossilized dinosaur skin impressions showing remarkable detail, some with pebbly scales like lizards, others with more complex patterns, some sections smoother than others, different textures serving different functions on different body parts. Imagine these creatures in the process of shedding, itchy and uncomfortable perhaps, rubbing against trees or rocks to help the old skin slough away and reveal fresh layers beneath. It's a vulnerable time when the new skin is still tender and sensitive, but also a renewal, a literal fresh start, the old and worn replaced by the new and unblemished. You too shed your outermost layer constantly. Millions of skin cells fall away every day, dust that floats around your home and gradually settles. You're always in a state of renewal, always in the process of becoming a slightly newer version of yourself. The Hell Creek Formation in Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota contains the latest Cretaceous dinosaurs, the final communities living right up to the extinction event 66 million years ago. In these rocks, we find Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus, Ankylosaurus and Edmontosaurus, all living in a landscape of rivers and floodplains, with warm, temperate forests and seasonal rainfall. Then, at a precise layer in the rock, the dinosaurs vanish and mammals begin to diversify and grow larger. That boundary layer, often just a few centimeters thick, represents the asteroid impact and its immediate aftermath, a thin line between two worlds. Below it, the age of dinosaurs. Above it, the age that would eventually lead to us. Walking through these formations, you can place your hand on that boundary, touching the before and after simultaneously. Endings and beginnings are often closer than we think, sometimes separated by nothing more than a thin layer of clay enriched with iridium from space. What seems like the end of everything is also, always, the beginning of something new. Troodon was one of the most intelligent dinosaurs relative to its body size, possessing a brain-to-body mass ratio comparable to modern birds. It had large eyes with binocular vision, suggesting it hunted at night when many other predators were inactive, pursuing small mammals and other creatures that emerged after dark. Its hands had opposable digits capable of grasping, and its sickle-shaped claw on each foot could be held retracted while running, then deployed during attacks. This combination of intelligence, manual dexterity, visual acuity, and specialized weaponry made Troodon a formidable predator despite its relatively small size, about as tall as a human but much lighter. Intelligence isn't about size. It's about the complexity of neural connections, the processing power relative to the problems you need to solve. In darkness, when sight-based hunters struggled, Troodon thrived, finding its niche in the nighttime world. Sometimes success comes from operating in spaces and times that others ignore, from developing skills suited to overlooked opportunities rather than competing head-on in crowded arenas. The fossilization process that preserves dinosaurs is extraordinarily rare. The vast majority of creatures that ever lived left no trace, their bodies consumed, scattered, decomposed without any lasting record. For a dinosaur to fossilize, it had to die in specific circumstances, buried quickly by sediment before scavengers and weather could destroy it, in an environment where minerals could infiltrate and replace organic material atom by atom. Then the surrounding rock had to be lifted and eroded at just the right rate to bring the fossil near the surface without destroying it. And finally, a human had to happen across it and recognize what they were seeing. When you look at a dinosaur skeleton in a museum, you're witnessing the end result of a chain of improbabilities so unlikely that it borders on miraculous. Every fossil is a lottery win, a message from the past that beat astronomical odds to reach us. The fact that we have any dinosaur fossils at all is remarkable. The fact that we have enough to reconstruct entire ecosystems and evolutionary lineages is staggering. Most stories are lost. These few that survive deserve our attention and wonder. Parasaurolophus possessed one of the most distinctive crests in the dinosaur world, a long tubular structure that curved back from its skull like a massive horn or ornate pipe. Inside this crest were hollow passages connecting the nasal cavities, and when the animal breathed, air passed through these elaborate chambers. By creating computer models of the internal structure and simulating airflow, scientists have recreated the sounds this dinosaur could make. Deep, resonant calls like a brass instrument, capable of being heard over vast distances. Different species had differently shaped crests producing different tones, possibly allowing individuals to identify their own species by sound alone in dense forests where vision was limited. These weren't roars or shrieks, but something closer to song, long sustained notes echoing across Cretaceous landscapes, communication that was as much music as message. Sound shaped their social world, allowed connection across distances sight couldn't bridge. In darkness now, sound might be your strongest remaining connection to the world. The hum of electronics, distant traffic, maybe another person breathing nearby, or simply the sound of your own heartbeat in your ears. These simple sounds confirm existence, presence, the continuation of life through the night. Dinosaurs almost certainly displayed a wide range of parenting strategies, just as modern animals do. Some species were precocial, meaning their young hatched relatively developed and capable of feeding and moving independently almost immediately, requiring minimal parental care. Others were altricial, hatching helpless and requiring extended parental feeding and protection. Some species may have guarded nesting colonies, but provided no care for individual young. Others brought food to their nestlings for weeks or months. Some juveniles stayed with parents for years, learning migration routes and survival skills. Others dispersed shortly after hatching, never knowing their parents as individuals. This diversity of strategies reflects different solutions to the problem of reproduction, different balances of investment and risk. There's no single right way to nurture the next generation, only countless variations that work well enough in their specific contexts. The same is true of human care and growth. The path you took to become who you are wasn't the only valid path, just yours, shaped by circumstances and choices and chances that can never be fully replicated. Edmontosaurus was a large hadrosaur, one of the duck-billed dinosaurs, living in North America during the latest Cretaceous. It possessed hundreds of tiny teeth arranged in dental batteries, tightly packed structures that created continuous grinding surfaces for processing tough plant material. As teeth wore down from use, new ones moved up to replace them, maintaining functional chewing surfaces throughout the animal's life. An individual might go through thousands of teeth over its lifetime, growing them constantly, using them up, replacing them in an endless cycle of renewal. These dental batteries were some of the most sophisticated chewing systems ever to evolve, more complex even than those of modern horses or cows. They allowed Edmontosaurus to extract nutrition from plants other herbivores couldn't efficiently process, reducing competition and allowing it to thrive in large herds. Sophistication isn't always visible from outside. Sometimes the most complex mechanisms are hidden inside, working away unseen, their excellence evident only in their results. You contain sophisticated systems too, most running without conscious oversight, elegantly solving problems you don't even know you have. Some dinosaurs, particularly smaller theropods, may have been capable of rapid acceleration and agile maneuvering far exceeding what larger predators could achieve. Biomechanical modeling suggests animals like Velociraptor could accelerate, turn, and leap with extraordinary precision, using their long tails as dynamic stabilizers during rapid directional changes. Their hunting strategy likely relied on this agility, darting in and out of striking range, using speed and unpredictability rather than overwhelming strength. They were probably ambush predators or pursuit hunters, chasing down prey through complex terrain where larger predators couldn't follow, their small size an advantage in dense vegetation or broken ground. Sometimes being small and quick serves better than being large and powerful. Sometimes the best strategy is to be hard to pin down, mobile and adaptive rather than immovable and rigid. There's strength in agility, power in the ability to change direction rapidly when circumstances shift. Flexibility and responsiveness often outlast brute force in the long run. Dinosaur coprolites, fossilized dung, provide remarkable insights into diet and digestive systems that bones alone cannot reveal. These fossils contain crushed bones, plant fragments, bits of shell, whatever the dinosaur ate preserved in the shape and form of its waste. Large carnivore coprolites sometimes contain fragments of bones so thoroughly crushed that we can deduce incredible bite forces, jaws capable of crunching through bones to extract marrow and nutrients. Herbivore coprolites show partially digested plant cuticles and wood fragments, evidence of the tough vegetation they processed. Some contain pollen, allowing us to reconstruct the flowering plants that existed in that ecosystem at that moment in time. These are undignified fossils, perhaps, not as glamorous as skulls and claws, but they're honest records of daily life, evidence of the ordinary processes that sustain these creatures day by day, meal by meal. Life is built from mundane necessities, from eating and eliminating, from meeting basic needs repeatedly across spans of time. There's no shame in this. It's universal, the underlying rhythm that supports every higher function and achievement. The polar regions during the Mesozoic, as mentioned earlier, were ice-free but still experienced extreme light cycles. Months of continuous daylight in summer followed by months of continuous darkness in winter. Plant growth would have been restricted to the summer months, creating boom and bust cycles of abundance and scarcity. Dinosaurs living in these regions had to adapt to these extremes, either migrating hundreds of miles between winter and summer ranges, or finding ways to survive dark winters. Evidence suggests different species used different strategies. Some trackways show massive movements of herds toward lower latitudes in fall and back toward polar regions in spring. Other species show adaptations for year-round residence, perhaps hibernating or entering torpor during the worst of winter. These polar dinosaurs remind us that life finds ways to persist even in challenging environments, that adaptation takes countless forms, and that no single habitat remains too harsh for life to colonize eventually. You too adapt to your environment's cycles, seasons, schedules, social contexts, constantly adjusting your behavior to match changing circumstances, usually without even noticing you're doing it. Quetzalcoatlus was one of the largest flying animals ever to exist, a pterosaur, not technically a dinosaur, but a contemporary with a wingspan that may have exceeded 35 feet, comparable to a small airplane. Despite this enormous size, it was surprisingly light, perhaps 500 pounds or less, with hollow bones and a body structure optimized for flight efficiency. When it stood on the ground, it would have towered over most dinosaurs, as tall as a giraffe, an awe-inspiring presence. Yet this giant launched itself into the air and soared on thermal updrafts, riding air currents across continents with minimal effort, scanning the ground below for carrion or small prey. It represents the extreme limit of what physics allows for powered flight, a creature so massive it seems impossible, and yet it existed, it flew, it thrived for millions of years. Sometimes things that seem impossible are simply difficult, requiring very specific conditions and adaptations, but achievable nonetheless. The boundaries of possibility are often farther out than we assume, leaving room for wonders we haven't imagined yet. Dinosaur social structures remained somewhat mysterious, but evidence suggests complexity and diversity. Some species clearly lived in extended family groups with older juveniles helping to raise younger siblings, a pattern seen in some modern birds. Other species formed large mixed herds where different age groups and even different species commingled, creating communities bound by mutual benefit rather than kinship. Some may have been solitary except during mating season, individuals maintaining territories and avoiding each other, except when reproduction demanded contact. Trackways sometimes show evidence of individuals limping or injured, yet continuing with the herd rather than being abandoned, suggesting group cohesion extended to care of the vulnerable. We can't know if this was emotional connection or simply instinct, but the result was the same. Creatures looking after each other, staying together through difficulties. Community takes many forms, serves many functions, but at its core, it's about not facing existence entirely alone. Even the presence of others who make no active intervention can be comforting, proof that you're not the only consciousness navigating this strange experience of being alive. The Morrison Formation, mentioned earlier, preserves evidence of periodic droughts during the late Jurassic, with layers showing dried mud cracks and concentrated bones where animals died around dwindling water sources. These drought layers are sobering reminders that life in the Mesozoic wasn't an endless Eden but included harsh times, seasons or years when food and water grew scarce and populations suffered. Yet after each drought, the ecosystems recovered, life returned, diversity rebounded. The same species that struggled during bad years thrived during good ones, their populations expanding to refill available habitat. This resilience, this capacity to endure difficult periods and recover when conditions improved, characterized the dinosaur lineage for over 160 million years. They persisted through climate changes, through asteroid impacts smaller than the final one, through volcanic eruptions and sea level changes and countless local catastrophes. They endured not by being indestructible but by being resilient, by surviving long enough for conditions to shift again in their favor. Resilience isn't about never struggling. It's about not giving up during the struggle, maintaining yourself through difficulty, until things improve, as they eventually do. In the Two Medicine Formation of Montana, scientists have found evidence of extensive nesting colonies of Maiasaura, with nests spaced just far enough apart that brooding adults wouldn't interfere with each other, but close enough for communal protection. These colonies may have contained thousands of nests, covering areas the size of multiple football fields, all active simultaneously during nesting season. The adults brought vegetation to their nests, building mounds that would compost and generate heat for the eggs. After hatching, the babies stayed in the nests for extended periods while parents brought food, their bones showing growth rates that required sustained feeding rather than immediate independence. This picture of mass nurseries, of communities coming together to raise the next generation in relative safety, speaks to sophisticated social behavior and long-term investment in offspring. These weren't simple creatures acting on mindless instinct, but parents making effort-intensive choices to give their young the best chance at survival. Care takes energy, attention, sacrifice. That it was worth it to these animals, that they invested so heavily in their offspring, suggests that future mattered to them in whatever way dinosaurs could conceive of future. Your own rest tonight is investment in future versions of yourself, care directed inward, energy preserved for tomorrow's needs. Let's pause once more. Notice the quality of your attention now compared to when we started. Perhaps it's grown softer, less focused, more diffuse. Maybe you've missed entire facts, your consciousness dipping down toward sleep then bobbing back up briefly before sinking again. This is exactly right. You're not trying to stay alert or capture every word. You're allowing yourself to drift, using these stories as a gentle current to carry you toward rest rather than an anchor keeping you in wakefulness. Your breathing has probably slowed even more. Your muscles have released tensions you didn't know you were holding. The night is holding you safely. Millions of years are holding you, all that deep time before and all that will come after, and your small moment of rest is nestled safely within it all. Nothing is required of you. Simply be here, breathing, drifting, letting go. Dracorex, a small pachycephalosaur whose name means Dragon King, was discovered in South Dakota and initially described as its own species based on its elaborate horns and spikes decorating its skull. However, more recent analysis suggests Dracorex might simply be a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus, its horns and spikes slowly resorbing, and its skull dome thickening as it matured into the adult form we're more familiar with. If this is correct, it means we've been fooled by growth stages, mistaking young animals for entirely different species. This happens periodically in paleontology. Specimens that seem distinct eventually reveal themselves to be age stages of the same animal, their appearance so different at different ages that only careful study reveals the connection. It's a reminder that identity changes over time, that what something is at one stage doesn't predict what it might become. You are not who you were 10 years ago, won't be in 10 years the person you are now. This isn't loss or failure but natural transformation, the expected progression of any life moving through time. Some dinosaur species engaged in complex display behaviors that left no direct fossil evidence but can be inferred from physical adaptations. The frills of ceratopsians, the crests of hadrosaurs, the plates of stegosaurs, all these structures were probably brightly colored or patterned, used in visual displays to attract mates or intimidate rivals. Some dinosaurs may have danced, performed ritualized movements like the elaborate courtship displays of modern birds. Others might have created display grounds, cleared areas where males competed for female attention through shows of fitness and vigor. We'll never know exactly what these displays looked like, never see the colors or hear the accompanying calls, but we know they existed, that these animals invested energy in beauty and performance, that their lives included elements beyond simple survival. Even in the struggle for existence, there was room for artistry, for behaviors that served no purpose except communication and aesthetic appeal. Beauty isn't frivolous. It's a fundamental part of how living things navigate their social worlds, how they form bonds and make choices. You respond to beauty too, find meaning in aesthetics, seek out experiences and objects and relationships that possess qualities beyond mere utility. The breakup of Pangea didn't just separate dinosaur populations geographically. It created different climate zones and ecosystems that drove divergent evolution. By the late Cretaceous, the continents were approaching their modern configurations, and dinosaur faunas on different landmasses had diverged substantially. South America developed unique titanosaurs and abelisaurids. North America had ceratopsians and tyrannosaurs. Asia evolved distinctive hadrosaurs and overpterosaurs. These separate trajectories created a world far more diverse than the earlier Pangea had supported, with dozens of environments and climates each fostering unique communities. Separation and isolation aren't only about loss, they're also about the space needed for experimentation, for trying variations that might not survive in more connected, competitive environments. Sometimes distance allows development that closeness would prevent. Sometimes growing into your full potential requires stepping away from where you started, finding new contexts that call forth different aspects of your character than familiar surroundings would. Plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, marine reptiles living alongside dinosaurs in Mesozoic oceans, evolved from terrestrial ancestors who returned to the sea, their limbs transforming into flippers, their bodies streamlining for life in water. These weren't dinosaurs, but they occupied aquatic niches while dinosaurs dominated land. Some reached enormous sizes, apex predators ruling the oceans just as T-Rex ruled terrestrial environments. After the mass extinction, these marine reptiles vanished along with non-avian dinosaurs, leaving the oceans open for other groups to diversify into. Today's ocean predators, sharks and toothed whales, are fundamentally different creatures filling similar roles. The functions persist even when the specific animals performing them change. Ecosystems maintain certain roles that get filled by whatever lineages happen to be available and adaptable. You fill roles too: family roles, professional roles, social roles. But the roles aren't you. They're positions you occupy temporarily, and if you step away, someone or something else will eventually fill them. This isn't diminishing your importance, but recognizing that systems are larger than individuals, that life continues in new configurations even after specific participants exit. The smallest dinosaur eggs found belonged to small theropods and were only about an inch long, while the largest reached sizes comparable to footballs or rugby balls. The size of eggs relative to body size reveals reproductive strategies. Smaller eggs relative to body size mean more eggs per clutch but longer development time needed for babies to reach adult size. Larger eggs mean fewer offspring, but each starting with more resources and possibly reaching independence faster. Modern reptiles and birds show similar patterns, each species balanced on a point along the spectrum between many small offspring and few large offspring, each strategy viable in different ecological contexts. There's no objectively superior approach, only trade-offs, different solutions to the same fundamental problem of propagating your lineage into the future. Your own approach to problems involves similar trade-offs: quality versus quantity, depth versus breadth, specialization versus generalization. The choices you make aren't right or wrong in absolute terms, only more or less suited to your particular circumstances and values. Dinosaurs likely couldn't see the color red as we can. Most reptiles and birds see into the ultraviolet spectrum, but their red sensitivity is often reduced compared to mammals. This means the world they inhabited might have appeared shifted toward blues and greens and ultraviolets, with reds appearing darker or grayed out. Flowers that appear brilliantly red to us might have looked duller to them, while flowers that seem white or pale to us might have glowed with ultraviolet patterns we can't perceive. Every species inhabits its own sensory world, a unique slice of reality determined by its sensory apparatus and neural processing. What seems real and obvious to you might be invisible to another creature, while they perceive dimensions of existence you cannot access. Reality is not a single objective thing but a collection of perspectives, each valid within its own framework, none complete or fully comprehensive. The world you experience is real, but it's not the only reality, just the version your particular sensory and cognitive systems construct from available data. This should inspire both humility and wonder. Humility because your view is limited. Wonder because realities you can't perceive still exist all around you. The Bone Cabin Quarry in Wyoming, part of the Morrison Formation, is one of the most productive dinosaur fossil sites ever discovered, yielding remains of dozens of individuals from multiple species, all preserved in a single location. Early paleontologists found so many bones here that they built a cabin from them while excavating, creating a structure literally made of fossilized dinosaur remains. This concentration suggests the area was once a predator trap or drought-induced death site, a place where animals came seeking water or got mired in mud, their bodies accumulating over time until a massive bone bed formed. Today, many of the specimens in museums around the world came from this single site, meaning multiple institutions display pieces of the same ancient ecosystem, fragments of a community that lived and died together, now scattered across continents in glass cases. Even in death and fossilization, these creatures maintain connections, their remains still telling collective stories despite being physically separated. Nothing truly isolated exists. Everything connects to something, and those connections persist in unexpected ways across time and space. Spinosaurus, that strange aquatic predator we discussed earlier, had dense bones that would have helped it dive and stay submerged while hunting, counteracting the buoyancy that hollow bones would have created. This is the same strategy used by modern marine mammals and diving birds, who either have dense bones or swallow stones to act as ballast. But density came with trade-offs. It made the animal heavier, required more energy to move, reduced agility on land. Spinosaurus seems to have accepted these costs in exchange for aquatic advantages, becoming more specialized for water than any other known theropod. Specialization always involves sacrifice, giving up generalist competencies to gain specialist advantages. You've specialized too, whether consciously or not, developing certain skills and knowledge deeply while leaving other areas undeveloped. This isn't failure but focus, the recognition that excellence in everything is impossible, and that choosing what to be excellent at means accepting adequacy or inexperience in other domains. Your limitations aren't flaws but the natural consequence of having devoted your finite time and energy to specific pursuits. Many dinosaurs swallowed stones deliberately, as mentioned with sauropods, but these gastroliths served slightly different functions in different species. In some, they were primarily digestive aids, grinding plant material. In others, they might have served as ballast, adding weight low in the body cavity to lower the center of gravity and improve stability. Some species might have used them for both purposes simultaneously, practical solutions serving multiple needs. These stones would be carefully selected, often from specific rock types that had the right hardness and texture, and carried within the body for weeks or months before being replaced. Imagine the sensation of carrying stones inside you, their weight and presence constant reminders of the earth itself incorporated into your body, literal pieces of the landscape becoming part of your digestive process. In a sense, we all carry pieces of our environment within us, molecules from food and water and air, incorporated into our cells and tissues, our bodies continuously built from the world around us and continuously returning material back to that world. The boundary between self and environment is porous, constantly negotiated, never as clear as it appears. Fossil preservation varies dramatically in quality from site to site and time to time. Some fossils are little more than fragmentary bones or teeth, compressed and distorted almost beyond recognition. Others preserve exquisite detail. Skin impressions, feather structures, stomach contents, even fossilized soft tissues with cellular structures still visible under microscopy. The difference comes down to burial conditions, mineral chemistry, speed of covering, absence of scavengers, countless variables that had to align perfectly. The best preservation tends to occur in fine-grained sediments like volcanic ash or deep lake muds, environments where oxygen was limited and decay slowed dramatically. In such places, creatures that sank to the bottom might be covered within hours, sealed away from the processes that normally erase all traces of death. These exceptional preservations are scientific treasures, offering glimpses of details that normally vanish. But they're also haunting. Creatures caught in moments of death or just after, sealed away in postures that speak of final moments, last breaths, the precise instant when life became something else. Death is the great transformer, taking the animate and rendering it inanimate, but sometimes preserving it so perfectly that scientists millions of years later can reconstruct not just anatomy, but behavior, diet, color, the texture of existence. Dinosaurs almost certainly dreamed, or experienced something analogous to dreaming. Modern reptiles and birds show sleep patterns that include REM-like states, periods when brain activity increases despite the body remaining still. During these periods, birds sometimes make small vocalizations or movements, as though acting out remembered or imagined behaviors. If dinosaurs possessed similar neurology, and their descendants and relatives suggest they did, then they too experienced altered consciousness during sleep, their brains processing the day's experiences, consolidating memories, perhaps even imagining scenarios that never occurred. We can't know what a dinosaur dream might have contained, what images or sensations moved through their sleeping minds, but we can know they weren't merely automata, switching off when inactive. Their inner lives, whatever form those took, continued in some fashion even when their bodies rested. You're drifting toward your own dreaming now perhaps, that strange state where your mind continues its activity without reality's constraints, where memory and imagination blend into scenarios that feel real while occurring, but dissolve into fragments upon waking. Dreams remain mysterious even with modern neuroscience, a reminder that consciousness holds depths we haven't fully charted. The Morrison Formation spans about 7 million years of deposition, meaning the ecosystems it preserves weren't static but constantly changing, evolving, species appearing and disappearing within that time frame. The Allosaurus and Stegosaurus we think of as contemporaries may have lived millions of years apart, separated by more time than separates us from the earliest human civilizations. When we reconstruct Morrison communities, we're often creating composites, combining species from different time slices into single imagined scenes that never actually existed in exactly that configuration. This doesn't make the reconstructions wrong, just incomplete, approximations that capture the general character of the time and place, while inevitably missing the specific details of any particular moment. All historical understanding works this way. We build models from fragments, fill gaps with educated guesses, create narratives that feel complete but remain forever provisional, subject to revision as new evidence emerges. The past is never fully knowable. We approach it asymptotically, getting closer and closer to accurate understanding, but never quite arriving at perfect knowledge. This uncertainty isn't failure but the nature of working backward from effects to causes, from present evidence to past events. The Dinosaurs, a member of the Dinosaur family mentioned earlier, possessed the longest claws of any known animal, measuring up to 3 feet from base to tip, looking more like scythe blades than biological structures. Despite these fearsome weapons, this dinosaur was herbivorous, using those claws to pull branches within reach and strip foliage, processing enormous amounts of vegetation through its small beaked mouth. It had a pot-bellied body to accommodate the large gut needed for digesting tough plant material, and long neck for reaching into trees, a body plan that looks cobbled together from different animals but worked successfully for millions of years. Sometimes the most effective solutions don't look elegant or optimized. They look strange, cobbled together, almost jury-rigged, yet they function perfectly for their specific purpose. Not everything that works is beautiful by conventional standards, and not everything beautiful is optimally functional. There's room in the world for the weird and wonderful, for solutions that ignore aesthetic principles in favor of pure effectiveness. You don't have to be graceful or conventional to be successful, just adequately suited to your particular challenges. Dinosaur metabolism has been debated for decades, with scientists arguing whether they were cold-blooded like modern reptiles, warm-blooded like mammals and birds, or something in between. Current consensus suggests many dinosaurs were mesothermic, maintaining body temperatures above ambient through some combination of internal heat production and external heat absorption, but without the fully regulated internal thermostats of modern mammals. Larger dinosaurs benefited from gigantothermy, where sheer body mass retains heat so effectively that even low metabolic rates maintain stable warm temperatures. Smaller dinosaurs might have been more fully warm-blooded, needing higher metabolic rates to generate sufficient heat. This diversity suggests metabolism, like most traits, existed on a spectrum, with different species adopting different strategies based on their size, environment, and lifestyle. Few things in biology are absolute. Most exist on continuums, spectrums, gradients between extremes. Your own characteristics, physical and psychological, rarely represent absolute extremes but point somewhere along various spectrums, combinations of tendencies rather than fixed categories. You contain multitudes, contradictions, complexities that resist simple categorization. Fossilized dinosaur trackways sometimes show evidence of behavior changes in response to environmental factors. One famous trackway shows a theropod changing from a walking gait to a running gait, possibly responding to prey spotted in the distance. Another shows multiple individuals veering away from an obstacle no longer visible, their paths diverging around empty space that once held something they needed to avoid. These traces capture decision-making, real-time adjustments to changing circumstances, proof that these creatures were responsive and adaptable rather than locked into rigid behavioral programs. Every footprint represents a choice, usually unconscious but occasionally deliberate. Where to step, how quickly to move, which direction to turn. Your own path through life creates its own kind of trackway, a record of choices and circumstances, deliberate decisions and unconscious adjustments, the trail you've walked through time. Most of it fades immediately, but some parts leave traces others can follow or scholars can study, trying to understand what you were doing and why, reconstructing your journey from the evidence you inadvertently left behind. The largest predator in North America during the late Cretaceous was Tyrannosaurus rex, and we have enough specimens now to understand individual variation within the species. Some were more robust, with heavier builds and thicker bones. Others were more gracile, lighter and potentially faster. These might represent male and female differences, or simply the normal variation found in any population, the expected diversity of body types that occurs when millions of individuals express the same genetic blueprint under varying environmental conditions. Not every T-Rex was identical, and the differences between individuals might have been as noticeable to them as differences between individual humans are to us. Variation is the rule, not the exception. Uniformity is artificial, the result of selective breeding or extreme environmental pressure. In nature, diversity flourishes, each individual expressing a slightly different version of the general type. You're a unique expression too, variations on human themes, sharing fundamental traits with everyone else while differing in countless small ways that accumulate into individuality. There's never been another precisely like you and never will be, not because you're special in some mystical sense, but because the particular combination of genetics, experiences, and circumstances that created you is unrepeatable. Some dinosaurs migrated thousands of miles between seasonal ranges, following food sources and favorable climates in annual cycles that shaped their entire lives. Evidence from bone chemistry shows that certain species ate plants from very different regions at different times of year, their teeth preserving chemical signatures that betray movements across vast distances. These migrations would have been epic undertakings, herds moving together for protection, young animals making the journey for the first time guided by experienced adults who had walked these paths for years. Along the routes, certain locations would have served as gathering points or rest stops, places where conditions made pausing safe and profitable. Today, these ancient migration routes are invisible, the landscapes transformed beyond recognition, but once they were as real and well-established as the migration routes of modern caribou or wildebeest. Life moves in cycles, responding to planetary rhythms, flowing between extremes rather than staying fixed in single locations. Your own life probably follows patterns and cycles, movements between different modes or locations or states of being, regular oscillations that structure time even when you don't consciously notice them. These rhythms connect you to deep biological patterns, ancient responses to the turning of days and seasons. When dinosaurs died, they usually didn't fossilize. They rotted away completely, returning their constituent atoms to the environment to be incorporated into new living things. Only under special circumstances did they escape this recycling and become fossils. So every fossil represents not just a creature, but an exception, an individual whose death occurred in exactly the wrong right place for decay, but the right place for preservation. Most dinosaurs left no trace. The ones we study are the exceptions, the statistical outliers, the tiny fraction that escaped the normal cycle. This makes them precious but also potentially misleading. We're studying the unusual, the ones who died in strange circumstances, and inferring from them the lives of millions who died in ordinary ways we'll never witness. Our understanding is built from exceptions, and we must always remember that what we know is incomplete, biased toward the preservable rather than the common. The same is true of human history. We remember the exceptional, the documented, the unusual, while the ordinary lives of billions leave no detailed trace, their experiences unrecorded but no less real for being lost. Most existence passes unremembered, which makes the present moment more precious. This fleeting experience you're having right now, irreplaceable and unrecordable in its full subjective depth. You've traveled far tonight through deep time, through millions of years and countless lives, and maybe you're still here with me, or maybe you've drifted off already into sleep, these words continuing in the background while your consciousness explores other territories. Either state is perfectly fine, exactly as it should be. Your body knows what it needs, and if sleep is calling, answer without resistance. If you're still awake, simply notice that wakefulness without judgment. There's no schedule to keep, no required time for sleep to arrive. It comes when it comes, and trying to force it only pushes it away. So relax into this moment, this breath, this gentle darkness. The dinosaurs walked and flew and swam through their lives, and then they rested too, and then they moved again, cycles within cycles. You're honoring that same ancient rhythm now, giving yourself the rest that every living thing requires. Carnotaurus, discovered in Argentina, was a medium-sized theropod with extremely reduced arms, even smaller relative to body size than those of T-Rex, and a pair of thick horns above its eyes that gave it a distinctly bull-like appearance. Its skull was short and deep, suggesting powerful bite forces, and its skin impressions show pebbly scales with no evidence of feathers, though it lived in a time and place where many theropods were feathered. The function of those horns remains debated. They might have been used in intraspecies combat, pushing matches between males, or simply for display, visual signals of health and maturity. Carnotaurus represents a unique branch of the theropod family tree, the abelisaurids, which dominated southern continents after those land masses separated from the north, evolving distinctive features found nowhere else. Geographic isolation creates evolutionary laboratories where unique solutions emerge, forms and functions that would never appear in more connected populations, where gene flow and competition homogenize traits. Your own unique characteristics often emerge from isolation too, from time spent alone developing thoughts and skills without outside influence, creating aspects of yourself that are distinctly yours rather than borrowed or learned from others. The Hell Creek Formation has yielded numerous Triceratops specimens, so many that scientists can study them statistically, looking for patterns across populations rather than just describing individual fossils. This population-level analysis reveals that Triceratops varied considerably in horn shape, frill dimensions, and body size, with some of this variation probably representing age differences, and some representing individual uniqueness or sexual dimorphism. No two individuals were identical, just as no two humans are identical, and that variation was normal and expected, not a sign of multiple species, but simply the natural diversity within one. Being different from others of your species isn't abnormal. It's the standard state of affairs, the baseline condition of biological existence. Conformity and uniformity are artificial constructs, useful sometimes for social cohesion, but never reflections of natural reality. You're supposed to be different from everyone else. That's not a problem to solve but a feature to embrace. The Yixian Formation in China has revolutionized our understanding of dinosaur appearance and behavior by preserving creatures in extraordinary detail, including feathers, skin, scales, gut contents, and even color patterns in some cases. These fossils formed in volcanic lakes where fine ash rained down and buried animals quickly, creating conditions perfect for exceptional preservation. The result is a snapshot of early Cretaceous ecosystems where dinosaurs, pterosaurs, early mammals, ancient birds, and countless plants existed together in complex communities. We can see what these animals ate, how they looked, even what parasites infected them. The Yixian gives us resolution nowhere else matches, transforming abstract reconstructions into specific, detailed portraits. Yet it represents only one place and one brief window of time. Countless other ecosystems from other places and times remain unknown or poorly preserved, reminding us that even our best knowledge is fragmentary. What we understand clearly is always dwarfed by what we understand poorly or don't know at all. Humility comes naturally when you recognize how much remains uncertain, how many questions have no answers yet, how much mystery persists despite decades of dedicated research. The discovery of soft tissue preserved inside dinosaur bones has been controversial but repeatedly confirmed. With flexible blood vessels, possible cell structures, and protein fragments surviving across 65+ million years. This wasn't supposed to be possible according to earlier assumptions about how quickly organic materials degrade. But nature doesn't always follow our assumptions. The preservation likely required special circumstances, rapid burial, iron-rich groundwater, chemical conditions that stabilized proteins against decay. These finds don't mean we'll extract dinosaur DNA and clone them. The genetic material is still too degraded for that. But they reveal that the boundary between biological and geological time is less absolute than we thought, that traces of life can persist far longer than seemed possible. Nothing is truly permanent, but neither does everything vanish completely. Traces remain, echoes persist, information survives in unexpected forms and places. The person you were years ago is gone in one sense but persists in another. Traces of earlier selves still present in memories, habits, characteristics that continue forward even as other aspects change. You're continuous and discontinuous simultaneously, the same being and different beings across time. Brachiosaurus, one of the most iconic sauropods, had front legs longer than its rear legs, creating a sloping back that positioned its shoulders and neck base high above the ground, a configuration unique among sauropods. This allowed it to browse at extreme heights, potentially reaching vegetation 40 or 50 feet above ground, accessing food sources other herbivores couldn't reach. Its nostrils were positioned high on its skull, once thought to indicate a semi-aquatic lifestyle, but now understood to simply allow breathing, while the head was raised into tree canopies for extended periods. This extreme specialization for high browsing meant Brachiosaurus wasn't competing directly with low-browsing sauropods or ground-level herbivores. It occupied a distinct feeding niche, reducing conflict by targeting resources others ignored. Finding your niche, the specific area where your capabilities meet underserved needs, often means looking upward or outward rather than fighting for the same resources everyone else wants. There's less competition in unexplored territories, in approaches others haven't considered, in spaces that seem difficult or unproductive, until you discover they're actually ideal for someone with your particular combination of traits. Ankylosaurs possessed complex nasal passages that looped and coiled inside their skulls, creating large surface areas for warming and humidifying air before it reached the lungs, similar to systems found in modern cold-adapted animals. These passages might also have enhanced the sense of smell, critical for herbivores needing to locate food sources and detect predators. Additionally, the passages might have served acoustic functions, modifying vocalizations and creating species-specific calls. This multifunctional anatomy shows how evolution rarely creates structures for single purposes. Most adaptations serve multiple roles, their utility maximized through versatility rather than specialization. Your own capabilities similarly serve multiple purposes, skills developed in one context proving useful in completely different situations, knowledge from one domain informing understanding in another. The most valuable traits are often those that transfer across contexts, that prove adaptable to changing circumstances rather than being useful only in narrow specific situations. Flexibility and multifunctionality create resilience. Overspecialization creates vulnerability. The Dinosaur Park Formation in Alberta represents a late Cretaceous coastal environment where rivers met the sea, creating diverse habitats from inland forests to coastal swamps and tidal zones, each supporting different dinosaur communities. Moving just a few miles might take you from environments dominated by hadrosaurs and ceratopsians to those frequented by tyrannosaurs and smaller predators, different species preferring different microhabitats within the same general region. This ecological complexity meant high biodiversity, many species coexisting by partitioning resources, each finding its specific niche where competition was minimized. Modern ecosystems work the same way. What looks like one habitat from a distance reveals itself as dozens of distinct microhabitats when examined closely, each with its own community of specialists. You exist in your own microhabitat too, a specific combination of social contexts, physical spaces, and activity patterns that might be nearly identical to someone else's environment from a distance, but distinctly different in the details that matter for daily experience. Your niche is unique even when it appears similar to others. Niches because the fine-grained details that structure your days and influence your well-being are specific to you. Some dinosaur species show evidence of injuries and diseases that would have been debilitating or life-threatening, but that the animal survived, sometimes for years afterward. Bones show healed fractures, infections that were overcome, injuries that became permanent disabilities, yet didn't prevent continued survival. One Allosaurus specimen shows evidence of multiple serious injuries across its skeleton: fractured ribs, a damaged shoulder, a severe foot infection, yet all show signs of healing, meaning this predator continued living and hunting despite being significantly impaired. Its herd or pack might have helped it survive, or perhaps it adapted its hunting strategy to accommodate its disabilities. Life is resilient, finding ways to continue even when compromised, adjusting to new limitations while maintaining core functions. You've survived injuries and illnesses too, both physical and emotional, events that might have seemed insurmountable at the time, but that you moved through and beyond, adapting, healing, finding ways to continue despite altered circumstances. Resilience isn't about being undamaged, but about continuing despite damage, integrating scars and limitations into a life that remains worth living. The extinction event 66 million years ago that ended the Cretaceous also terminated the pterosaurs, marine reptiles, many plant species, and countless invertebrates, creating opportunities for mammals and birds to diversify into newly emptied ecological roles. This pattern of extinction followed by radiation, where surviving lineages rapidly diversify to fill available niches, has occurred multiple times in Earth's history, each mass extinction reshuffling life's deck and dealing out new possibilities. The extinction wasn't purposeful or meaningful. It was catastrophic, destroying ecosystems and causing immense suffering for creatures who died. Yet from a long-term perspective, it created space for new forms, new experiments, eventually leading to the world we inhabit. Endings and beginnings intertwine, the same event functioning as apocalypse for some lineages and liberation for others. When something ends in your own life, a relationship, a job, an identity you've held, it simultaneously closes possibilities and opens new ones, the space previously occupied by what ended now available for something different. Neither the ending nor the beginning is absolutely good or bad. Their transformations, shifts from one configuration to another, each with losses and gains. Dinosaurs ate rocks, as we've discussed, but they also sometimes ate bones. Some predators engaged in osteophagy, bone eating, crunching up the skeletons of their prey to extract calcium and marrow, nutrients particularly important for egg-laying females. Coprolites containing crushed bone fragments show this behavior clearly. This wasn't pointless destruction but practical nutrition seeking, using every part of a kill to meet dietary needs. Modern animals do this too. Wolves crunch bones. Many scavengers consume entire carcasses, including bones. Nothing is wasted when nutrients are scarce. Everything becomes potential food. There's a kind of brutal efficiency in this. Life, consuming minerals, consuming life in endless recycling. Your own body is built from materials that were once parts of other organisms, plants and animals you've eaten, their molecules disassembled and rebuilt into your tissues. You're made of other lives, transformed but not created from nothing, a temporary configuration of matter that will eventually disassemble and become parts of other organisms in turn. This isn't morbid but factual, the reality of material existence, the continuous flow of matter through different forms. Fossil tree rings from the Mesozoic show growth patterns indicating seasonal variation in temperature and rainfall, even in regions that were generally warmer than equivalent latitudes today. These patterns allow reconstruction of ancient climates with surprising precision, revealing years of drought or unusual cold, sequences of favorable growing seasons followed by harsher periods. Dinosaurs lived through this variation, their lives shaped by weather and climate just as yours is, good years and bad years, seasons of plenty and seasons of scarcity. They didn't exist in some unchanging Eden, but in dynamic environments requiring constant adaptation. The stability of conditions is always temporary. Change is the only constant, and survival depends on flexibility, on tolerating variation rather than requiring perfect conditions. Your own life unfolds through changing circumstances too, better and worse times, periods when everything flows easily, and periods when every step requires effort. This variation is normal, expected, the standard pattern of existence rather than evidence that something has gone wrong. Things change. That's what they do, and you change with them or despite them, adjusting as needed to maintain yourself through different conditions. The last dinosaurs weren't degenerating or inferior to earlier species. They were as highly evolved and well-adapted as any that had come before, successful animals thriving in their environments right up until catastrophe struck. There was no gradual decline, no sense that dinosaurs were on their way out before the asteroid impact. They were dominant, diverse, occupying every ecological role from tiny insectivore to enormous herbivore to apex predator. The extinction wasn't a mercy killing of obsolete creatures, but an arbitrary disaster that destroyed successful ecosystems. This is perhaps the most sobering aspect of the story. Success and adaptation don't guarantee survival, because survival depends partly on factors completely beyond any organism's control. You can do everything right and still face circumstances that overwhelm your preparations. This isn't reason for despair, but for humility and compassion, recognition that outcomes aren't always deserved or predictable. that sometimes terrible things happen to well-adapted creatures for no reason except bad timing. The corollary is also true. Survival sometimes owes as much to luck as capability, and both success and failure contain elements beyond anyone's control. The smallest adult dinosaurs were roughly the size of chickens, tiny predators and herbivores living in underbrush and lower canopy levels, filling ecological roles similar to modern small birds and rodents. These tiny species are dramatically underrepresented in the fossil record because small bones are fragile and easily destroyed, scavenged completely, or simply overlooked. The fossil record is biased toward larger animals with more durable skeletons, meaning our picture of Mesozoic ecosystems probably overemphasizes the large and impressive, while understating the small and numerous. In reality, as in modern ecosystems, small animals probably vastly outnumbered large ones, forming the broad base of ecological pyramids, while the giant predators and herbivores occupied the narrow top. Size isn't everything. Small creatures are equally valid, equally adapted, equally successful within their niches. Your own impact might feel small sometimes, your efforts and contributions dwarfed by larger forces and more visible actors. But small actions accumulate. Small creatures collectively shape ecosystems more than large ones do, and quiet persistence often matters more than spectacular gestures. Many dinosaur species had asymmetric limbs, with one side slightly different from the other in muscle development or bone thickness, possibly indicating handedness or footedness, similar to right and left-handedness in humans. Some trackways show consistent patterns suggesting individuals favored one side when turning or leading off in a walk. This lateralization of function appears throughout the animal kingdom, brains specializing different hemispheres for different tasks, bodies developing slight asymmetries in response to repeated behaviors. Perfect symmetry is rare. Most organisms develop functional asymmetries, minor differences that reflect usage patterns and individual habits. Your own body is asymmetric, one hand more dexterous, one leg slightly stronger, countless small differences accumulated over years of favoring certain movements and approaches. These asymmetries are part of your individual history, records of how you've used your body, evidence of patterns and preferences that have shaped your physical form. They're not flaws but features, marks of lived experience rather than factory defaults. Dinosaur intelligence varied enormously across species, from relatively simple brains in heavily armored herbivores like ankylosaurs to complex brains in predators like Troodon and in social species like many hadrosaurs. Brain size relative to body size provides rough estimates of cognitive capacity, though behavior and lifestyle matter as much as raw brain size. Social species needed intelligence for navigating group dynamics. Predators needed it for hunting strategy. Prey species needed it for threat assessment. Different challenges selected for different cognitive capabilities, meaning intelligence wasn't a single measurable quantity, but a suite of specific abilities tailored to specific needs. You possess forms of intelligence that might go unrecognized by conventional measures, capabilities for navigating situations others find baffling, skills for solving problems others don't even recognize as problems. Intelligence is plural, contextual, always adapted to particular challenges rather than being a single general-purpose capacity. What seems intelligent in one context might be irrelevant or even maladaptive in another, and vice versa. Feathered dinosaurs didn't all have flight-capable feathers. Many had simpler proto-feathers, more like hair or down than the complex veined feathers of flying birds. These proto-feathers served insulation functions primarily, keeping small bodies warm in cool conditions, and secondarily served display functions, colored or patterned to communicate information to others. The evolution of true flight feathers came later, in specific lineages, through modifications of these simpler structures. This reminds us that complex adaptations rarely appear fully formed, but evolve gradually through intermediate stages, each stage functional for something even if not yet optimized for the ultimate function. Your own skills and capabilities develop through similar gradual processes, starting simple and growing more sophisticated through practice and refinement. Early stages clumsy and incomplete, but still functional, still serving useful purposes even while not yet mature. There's no shame in intermediate stages. They're necessary steps, not failures to immediately achieve mastery. Everything complex begins simple and develops gradually through countless small improvements. Some dinosaur eggs show evidence of having been colored, with pigments still detectable in shell fragments under certain analytical techniques. Colors probably ranged across blues, greens, browns, similar to modern bird eggs, serving camouflage functions or possibly species identification in communal nesting grounds. Blue-green eggs might have been harder for predators to spot in shaded nests. Speckled patterns might have broken up the egg's outline, making it blend into dappled light. These colors mattered, providing small survival advantages that accumulated across generations. Beauty and function intertwined throughout nature. Aesthetic qualities often serve practical purposes, patterns and colors communicating information, or providing protection while also possessing inherent visual appeal. The world dinosaurs perceived was full of color and pattern, information encoded in visual signals we can only partially reconstruct. Conversations carried out through appearances we'll never fully understand. Your own world is similarly rich with signals, most processed unconsciously, patterns and colors influencing behavior and emotion in ways you rarely explicitly notice. Dinosaurs lived on a planet that was significantly warmer than today, with tropical and subtropical conditions extending much farther toward the poles, no permanent ice caps, and sea levels much higher, flooding continental interiors and creating vast shallow seas. This world would be uncomfortable for modern humans, the heat and humidity oppressive in many regions. Yet dinosaurs thrived in it, adapted to conditions we would find challenging. Climate isn't objectively good or bad, but only more or less suited to specific organisms. What's optimal for one species is hostile for another. Your own optimal conditions, environmental and social, might differ considerably from others. Your thriving requiring circumstances that others would find uncomfortable, or your comfort zones stifling to people with different needs. There's no single correct way for the world to be, only different configurations that favor different forms of life. The conditions you need aren't demands for universal changes, but personal requirements, valid for you even if not universally applicable. We're in the deep part of night now, the hours when sleep comes easiest, when your body's circadian rhythms support rest most fully. If you're still awake, still following these words, simply notice that without judgment. Perhaps sleep is taking longer tonight, or perhaps some part of you is enjoying this gentle journey too much to let go yet. Either way is fine. There's no urgency, no pressure. These facts will continue, unfolding at their own pace, and you can drift away whenever your body decides it's ready. Notice your breath, how slow and deep it's become. Notice the heaviness in your limbs, the comfortable weight of blankets, the softness beneath you. Everything is exactly as it should be. The dinosaurs have waited millions of years to share their stories. They don't mind waiting a little longer while you settle into perfect comfort. Sauropods couldn't raise their heads much above shoulder height for extended periods, despite older illustrations showing them with necks stretched vertically like giraffes. The blood pressure required to pump blood to a brain 50 feet above the heart would have been unsustainable, and the cardiovascular system would have struggled enormously. Instead, these animals probably held their necks roughly horizontal or angled moderately upward, sweeping them side to browse across wide areas without moving their massive bodies frequently. This horizontal posture was more energy efficient, allowing them to feed constantly without cardiovascular strain. Sometimes the most efficient approach isn't the most dramatic or impressive looking, but the one that allows sustained effort without exhaustion. The same principle applies to human endeavors. Sustainable pace beats impressive bursts. Consistency outperforms intensity, and finding approaches you can maintain indefinitely matters more than achieving peak performance briefly before burning out. The discovery that many dinosaurs had feathers required wholesale changes to museum displays, books, and popular imagery, a process still ongoing decades after the first feathered dinosaur fossils were found. Resistance to changing established images was significant. People had become attached to specific versions of what dinosaurs looked like, and accepting radical revisions felt like loss rather than refinement. This resistance highlights how difficult it is to update mental models even when evidence clearly demands it. How invested we become in our current understandings even when they're provisional. You've probably experienced similar resistance when needing to update your understanding of something or someone, when evidence contradicts cherished beliefs, and accepting reality requires abandoning comfortable narratives. This resistance is natural but ultimately counterproductive. Clinging to outdated models doesn't make them accurate, only keeps you disconnected from reality. Better to embrace revision, to welcome new information even when it requires reconstructing your understanding, to value accuracy over familiarity. Coprolites sometimes contain surprising contents. Fish scales in the dung of terrestrial predators who apparently scavenged along shorelines. Conifer needles in the droppings of species whose teeth suggested they should have been eating different plants. Even evidence of cannibalism in a few cases. One dinosaur eating another of its own species. These finds remind us that behavior is often more flexible than anatomy might predict, that animals make opportunistic choices based on availability, rather than sticking rigidly to theoretical dietary preferences. When times are good, specialization works fine. When conditions become challenging, flexibility and willingness to exploit unusual resources might mean the difference between survival and starvation. Your own behavior is probably more flexible than you give yourself credit for, capable of adjustments and compromises you haven't needed to make yet because circumstances haven't demanded them. Crisis reveals capabilities that comfort allows to lie dormant, not creating them but calling them forth from reserve capacities you didn't know you possessed. The largest coprolites found measure over a foot in length and several inches in diameter, presumably produced by large carnivores like Tyrannosaurus rex, and they contain crushed bone fragments showing these predators could pulverize even large bones with their bites and digestive processes. The forces involved in creating such crushed remains are staggering. Bite pressures exceeding anything modern animals can generate digestive acids capable of dissolving bone tissue. Yet these same powerful animals engaged in parenting behaviors, carefully tending nests and possibly feeding regurgitated food to helpless hatchlings. Strength and gentleness aren't opposites but complementary capabilities, different tools deployed in different contexts. You contain contrasts too, capable of being fierce when necessary while also being tender, able to defend yourself or others while also offering care and vulnerability. The full range of your capacities includes apparent opposites held simultaneously, available as situations require them. Dinosaurs walked on different gaits depending on their body structure. Bipedal theropods walked almost entirely on their toes, their ankles held high off the ground like a sprinter in starting blocks, while sauropods walked on elephant-like column legs with padded feet supporting enormous weight. Some ornithischians could switch between bipedal and quadrupedal locomotion, walking on all fours while feeding or moving slowly but rearing up on hind legs to run. This flexibility in locomotion provided options, different movement modes for different purposes, efficiency matched to context. Your own approaches to life's challenges probably shift depending on circumstances, different strategies for different situations, flexibility allowing you to adapt methods to requirements rather than forcing every problem into the same solution framework. Versatility creates resilience. Having multiple approaches means you're never completely stuck when one method proves inadequate. The asteroid that ended the Cretaceous was approximately 6 miles in diameter, traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour when it struck shallow seas in what's now the Gulf of Mexico. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons, vaporizing rock and creating a crater over 100 miles across. Ejecta blasted into the upper atmosphere circled the Earth, raining back down as molten rock that ignited wildfires across entire continents. Tsunamis hundreds of feet high scoured coastlines. The dinosaurs didn't know it was coming, had no way to prepare or adapt, simply faced a sudden transformation of their entire world from viable to hostile in moments. No amount of preparation or adaptation would have saved them. The event was too massive, too sudden, too completely devastating. Sometimes there is no survival strategy, No clever adaptation that could have helped, only arbitrary catastrophe. This isn't a reason for despair but for compassion. Suffering isn't always meaningful, disasters aren't always preventable, and loss isn't always the result of inadequacy. Sometimes terrible things simply happen, and the only response is witnessing, mourning, and eventually continuing forward into whatever comes next. In the aftermath of the extinction, the surviving creatures faced a transformed world. Forests burned away, food chains collapsed, temperatures wildly fluctuating as ash clouds dissipated and greenhouse gases accumulated. Small mammals survived by sheltering underground, eating seeds and insects, persisting through months or years of scarcity. Birds survived, though most lineages perished. The few that made it through diversifying rapidly into emptied ecological niches. Crocodilians and turtles, creatures with low metabolic rates capable of surviving extended periods without food, endured when more active species starved. Life didn't end. It bottlenecked, squeezed through a narrow passage where only certain traits and sizes and tolerances allowed passage, then expanded again on the other side into new forms. Recovery took millions of years, ecosystems slowly rebuilding complexity as surviving lineages evolved and diversified. You've probably experienced smaller-scale versions of this pattern. Periods when everything fell apart, when you survived on minimal resources through sheer persistence, when future possibilities seemed permanently foreclosed. Yet, eventually conditions improved, opportunities reopened, and you discovered you could grow and diversify into new versions of yourself, shaped by but not limited to the catastrophes you'd survived. Some dinosaurs may have been nocturnal, hunting or foraging under cover of darkness, when their unique adaptations gave them advantages over diurnal competitors. Large eyes, enhanced senses of smell or hearing, specialized vision adapted to low light, all these would have supported nighttime activity. The night belonged to different communities than the day, different species active during different hours, temporally partitioning resources, just as spatial partitioning divided habitat. Your world also contains different communities active at different hours, night workers and day workers, early risers and night owls, different people with different rhythms finding their optimal times. You have your own chronotype, your own natural rhythm of alertness and rest that might not match conventional schedules, but serves you best when honored. Fighting your natural rhythms to fit arbitrary norms exhausts you. Accepting and working within them allows sustainable functioning. The largest dinosaur eggs couldn't exceed certain sizes, because embryos inside need to breathe through the shell. And as eggs get larger, the volume increases faster than surface area, eventually reaching a point where the baby inside would suffocate before hatching. This physical constraint meant even the largest dinosaurs hatched from relatively modest eggs and grew through extraordinary growth rates rather than starting large. Constraints aren't always limitations to overcome. Sometimes they're fundamental boundaries that shape what's possible, parameters within which all solutions must work. Your own life operates within constraints: time, energy, resources, physical laws, social realities. These boundaries aren't failures but the structure within which you build your life, the framework that makes certain forms possible while foreclosing others. Working elegantly within constraints, often produces more interesting results than having unlimited freedom, focus, and limitation, paradoxically enabling creativity. Birds are dinosaurs, we've established this, but it's worth sitting with that fact for a moment. Every bird you've ever seen, from hummingbirds to ostriches, from penguins to eagles, are living dinosaurs, members of a lineage that has persisted for over 230 million years, surviving mass extinctions and continental rearrangements and climate shifts that erased countless other lineages. They're not descended from dinosaurs as though dinosaurs are gone. They are dinosaurs as much as you are a mammal or a vertebrate. The age of dinosaurs never ended. It just became the age of birds, one lineage trading size for flight, teeth for beaks, but retaining that essential dinosaur architecture. Hollow bones, efficient lungs, parental care, complex behaviors. Continuity persists through transformation. Nothing truly ends, everything only changes form. You are continuity too, carrying forward genetics and traits and learned behaviors from ancestors stretching back through time, transformed but connected, unique but not separate from the chain of life that precedes and follows you. The final fact is perhaps the simplest. Dinosaurs existed. They weren't myths or fantasies, but real creatures who breathed and ate and raised their young on this same planet you inhabit, under the same sun, beneath the same stars, though continents and climates have shifted dramatically. They experienced pain and pleasure in whatever forms their nervous systems processed such things. They interacted with each other and their environments in complex ways we can only partially reconstruct. They lived, and then most died, and a few lineages persisted and transformed into new forms. Their story is part of Earth's story, part of life's story, and by extension part of your story, because you exist in a world shaped by their long tenure. You breathe air processed through evolutionary time by countless organisms including dinosaurs. You're built of atoms that once composed dinosaurs and will eventually compose other organisms. Everything is connected across time, not mystically, but literally, materially. You're part of the same unbroken chain of life, the same matter and energy cycling through different configurations, and there's profound comfort in that deep connection, that fundamental belonging to something far larger and older and more enduring than individual existence. And so we've arrived at the end of our journey through deep time, through 165 million years of dinosaurian existence, through continents that no longer exist in the shapes they once held, through climates and ecosystems as alien to us as another planet would be. You've traveled far tonight, perhaps in body but certainly in imagination, stepping outside the narrow span of human time into the vast stretches that precede us. I hope you found some measure of peace in these stories, some gentle fascination that allowed your busy mind to quiet, some wonder that made the concerns of your daily life feel temporarily small enough to set aside. The dinosaurs teach us many things if we listen carefully. They teach persistence, surviving and thriving across more time than our minds can truly comprehend, adapting to changes both gradual and catastrophic, finding ways to continue through circumstances that would seem impossible. They teach diversity, evolving into thousands of forms from tiny feathered predators to armored tanks to graceful long-necked giants, each finding its specific niche where it could flourish. They teach community, many species living in herds and packs, raising their young cooperatively, moving through their worlds together rather than alone. They teach resilience, recovering from injuries and illnesses, surviving through droughts and harsh seasons, persisting until luck or circumstances finally ran out. Most importantly, perhaps, they teach us humility and perspective. They remind us that we are recent arrivals in a story that began long before us and will continue long after us, that this planet has hosted innumerable forms of life before humans existed and will host innumerable forms after we're gone. Our time here is brief, our impact significant but not permanent, our certainties provisional. The dinosaurs seemed eternal, dominant beyond challenge, and yet they passed, most of them leaving only traces and one transformed lineage. We too will pass, our civilizations and works eventually becoming fossils or dust, messages for species we cannot imagine, explaining our existence to minds we cannot conceive. But this isn't cause for despair or nihilism. Rather, it's liberating. If everything is temporary, then mistakes are temporary too. Failures are temporary. Pain is temporary. Whatever burden you carried into this night will not last forever. It too will pass, will transform, will eventually be replaced by something else. You are part of a vast flow of time and life, held within it, moving through it, shaped by it while also contributing your small eddies and currents to its larger patterns. You matter within your context even though that context is temporary. The dinosaurs mattered for their time, and you matter for yours. As you drift into sleep now, or if you've already drifted away, and these words are simply echoing in the background of dreams, carry with you this sense of deep time, this connection to the vast story of life on Earth. You are not separate from that story but part of it, one expression of the same fundamental process that created dinosaurs and trilobites and trees and bacteria and everything else that has ever lived. You belong here, in this moment, in this world, carrying forward the legacy of billions of years of evolution, embodying capabilities and complexities that your ancestors barely dreamed of. Rest well tonight. Let your body restore itself through sleep. Let your mind wander through whatever landscapes dreams provide. Let yourself simply be without purpose or productivity for these hours of darkness. Tomorrow will come with its demands and opportunities, and you'll meet them as you always have, drawing on reserves of strength and wisdom you don't always recognize you possess. But for now, there is only rest, only the gentle rhythm of breath, only the soft darkness and the quiet comfort of knowing that you've done enough for today, that you are enough just as you are, that nothing more is required of you in this moment than to let go and trust the ancient rhythms of sleep to carry you where you need to go. Thank you for spending this time with me, for allowing these stories of vanished creatures to accompany you toward sleep. If you found peace in this journey, I hope you'll return again, and perhaps share this space with others who might need the gentle wisdom of deep time to quiet their restless minds. But for now, simply rest. The dinosaurs walked their long roads through time, and now they rest in stone and bone and the hollow skeletons of birds. You too have walked your roads today, and now it's time to rest, to release effort and surrender to the peace that waits patiently for you to stop resisting it. Sleep well, traveler through time. The stars that shone on dinosaurs still shine on you. The same atoms that compose their bodies compose yours. The same fundamental patterns of life that animated them animate you. You are ancient and new simultaneously, unique and universal, temporary and eternal. And for tonight, you are simply tired, and that's perfectly fine, and sleep is waiting to welcome you home. Good night.